Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Bonds and Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The suitcase wheels chattered over the tile like teeth. Sloane skimmed through the kitchen sunglasses on her head, perfume too sweet for the morning. She did not look at me when she spoke. She looked past me at the spotless counters. "We won't need you this time, Evelyn. Just leave the floor spotless." She smiled without warmth and tugged the suitcase upright. The smile was how she told me who I was in this house. Aiden shuffled in behind her with a backpack that sagged. Lily hugged my waist with both arms. Mark hovered near the pantry, phone in hand, thumb, scrolling half present. "You kids have fun," I said. My voice surprised me, small like something stored in a drawer. Lily lifted her face. "Come with us, Nana." Sloane's fingers closed around Lily's arm, gentle in public, not always gentle. "Grandma has things to do. Let's go." Mark glanced up. "Mom, you good?" I dried the same coffee mug twice, of course. They moved toward the blue front door. The door was the only bright thing from the old days. Stucco house, flat roof, yard scraped by wind, and that door painted a hopeful blue that David chose. Sloane pulled it open. Warm air moved in with the smell of exhaust and sage from the median. The door shut behind them, a tidy click. The quiet was loud. Dishwasher hum, swamp cooler groan from the hall, a spoon tilting in a cup and settling with a soft ring. I set the mug down and stared at the keys on the bowl by the door. 2 ring sets, one heavy with old metal, one newer marked with yellow tags that Sloane labeled "our copy." I waited for the part of me that always hurried to start moving. It did not. I walked through the house as if I'd never seen it. Gray sectional that Sloane bought on sale at a store with mirrors and eucalyptus candles. My rocking chair wedged by the hallway because it did not fit the aesthetic. The dining table was glass. Fingerprints caught the light. The pine table where Mark did math homework lived in the laundry room now, a blanket over it and a wobble in the leg. It smelled like detergent and dust. In the bedroom at the front of the house, the bedspread was their white. Pillows were their number, 4 on the bed, 2 on the bench. In the closet, a neat row of dresses in cool tones. My wardrobe had a corner. Sweaters folded in a stack that slid if I breathed near it. I stood a long time with my hand on the top drawer of the dresser. A plane went over heavy and slow from the base. I opened the drawer. Under a pile of old bank envelopes was a manila folder with the county seal, the deed. Hart Evelyn R. recorded in a year that felt closer than it was. I slid a finger along the raised ink. Under the deed was a second folder. This one was not mine. There were printouts, lines of emails, subject lines thread-like. I did not notice breathing until I heard it rough and open as if the house had no walls. My name was in a sentence and then the words "power of attorney." Another line used the words "collateral and accelerator," a smiling face at the end of a sentence about convincing me. The paper rattled when I set it down. My hands did not feel like my hands. They felt like someone else's hands that did not yet know what they would do. I sat on the edge of the bed. The room smelled like Sloane's night cream citrus, like a hotel lobby. The walls were painted grayish. My sky blue lived under it, quiet. There was a notebook on the nightstand, not a pretty one, cheap with blue lines and a stiff cardboard back. It came from Heart and Ink, the store that made the bell on the door part of my heartbeat for 30 years. I opened it and wrote on the first line with the ballpoint that left a slight burr in the paper, "What is mine?" I said the words out loud and the room changed shape. Not bigger, more honest. In the kitchen, the coffee had gone cold. I poured it out and ground the good beans that I hid behind the rice. The grinder sang and the smell rose. The smell was green and warm. It filled the place the perfume had been. I leaned on the counter with the deed under my palm, the weight of the paper firm and uncomplicated. There are calls you make with no expectation. There are calls you make because your body goes to the phone before you decide. I looked up a number I had not looked up in 15 years. It was still there. Ruth Morales, Santa Fe. The call rang and rang. I let it. A click. Silence, then her voice older and the same. Hello, Ruth. My throat tightened on the second syllable. A breath on her end careful. Evelyn, I need help. She was quiet long enough for me to hear the cooler guard against the heat pushing down on the roof. I heard something like a chair scrape or the shift of someone standing up. What happened? She asked. I looked at the counter. The invoices I had saved for Mark's business sat under a magnet shaped like a chili pepper. The magnet was a gift from a woman named Lucy who bought poster board every September. I saw David's wristwatch with its broken band in the junk drawer when I glanced down for a pen. Saw the heart and ink receipt spikes I took when I sold the store 2 metal fangs with no more paper to pierce. I stopped noticing what was mine, I said. Ruth said nothing. She let the words sit. She had always been better at silence than me. I carried the deed and the email folder to the dining table and laid them side by side. The glass reflected light back into my eyes until I had to squint. The pine table in the laundry room flashed in my mind the initials in the corner carved by a nail, E+M. I had pretended to be mad and then traced the groove alone afterward. They printed emails, I said. There is a plan in them. For me to sign things. For this house. I pressed my hand to the deed and felt the cool through the paper. Do not sign anything, Ruth said. Her voice sharpened, not mean precise. Do you hear me, Evie? I had not heard her call me that in years. It made something small and frightened stand up inside me. I hear you. There is the memory of a bell when you remember the store. Not the sound exactly a shape the sound left behind. The bell had rung for everyone, Mrs. Lucy with poster board, Mr. Arthur with legal copies, teenagers with tiny budgets who needed the better pen for an essay that mattered. The bell had rung when David carried boxes in at dawn and out at dusk until the day that drive went wrong and I learned how much space quiet can take up. I did not tell Ruth any of this. I did not tell her that Sloane moved my mother's cracked porcelain to the back of the cabinet, or that Mark set his empty beer on the pine table one last time before it went to the laundry room. I did not tell her that I was tired in a way that lived in the bones. I did not need to. The papers on the table said enough. I walked to the laundry room and pulled the blanket off the pine table. Dust motes lifted in the light from the high small window. The wobble in the leg was still there. I pressed my thumb into the initials until the edges found my skin. I carried the blanket back to the dining room and folded it. It was heavier than it looked. I went to the front door and opened it. The sun hit the blue paint and made it bright as a pool. Heat gathered on the stoop. 3 small sage plants held on in a row by the path. I rubbed my fingers over one and then brought them to my nose. The smell cut through everything. The street was empty, mirage shiny. In the distance, a siren wound down and faded. I took the bowl of keys from the console and poured them onto the runner. The clatter filled the narrow entry. I separated old from new. The oldest one still had faint grease on the grooves. David always said a key told a story if you listened. There were marks in the brass where it had missed the lock in the dark and tried again. The phone buzzed in my pocket. Ruth again. I will be there in the morning, she said. Do not sign anything. The line went quiet. I set the phone on the blue-lined notebook and closed my hand around the oldest key. The metal was warm from the sun. The house held its breath. Somewhere in the ductwork, the cooler switched from low to high, a soft surge that sounded like weather turning. I wrote a second line beneath the first. The blue door. I put the key to my ear and listened the way David used to as a joke. My reflection lay thin in the glass of the table. It looked back with a steadiness I recognized and had missed. I put the keys in a neat row. The deed lay in the middle. The email folder sat to the side like a stain I had not decided how to scrub. I turned off the grinder and the coffee maker. I washed the cold cup and set it upside down. The smell of beans stayed. The light slid across the floor and took its time. I moved with it. The house was still. The blue door gleamed in the last of the afternoon sun. The bowl on the console waited. I did not put the keys back. I left them where I could see them. I sat down at the glass table and kept writing. What is mine? The words looked right in the cheap lines. In the hallway, a floorboard ticked as it cooled. The swamp cooler breathed. The wind picked up outside and moved the sage and the chimes of the neighbor's porch with a shy touch. I listened until I could tell one sound from another. Then I picked up the phone again. Ruth, I said when she answered. Thank you. Try to sleep, she said. I will knock early. I ended the call and rested my fingers on the old key. The metal hummed with the heat it had borrowed. The blue door watched the room. I watched it back. Morning lifted in thin sheets of light over the stucco. I sat at the glass table with the blue-lined notebook open and the oldest key under my palm. When the knock came, it was clean and confident. I stood and checked the peephole. Ruth looked straight at the lens, hair pulled back, a leather briefcase against her hip. A man with a tool bag stood beside her, short and square in a blue shirt with Chavez stitched in white above the pocket. I opened the blue door. Ruth's eyes flicked around the entry as if the house were a client. No rush to hug. She set the briefcase on the console by the bowl and nodded at the keys laid out like a small parade. The man tipped his cap. Morning, ma'am. Theo Chavez. Ms. Morales said your locks could use an update. I stepped back. Yes, all of them. Theo reached for the deadbolt with a practiced softness. Tools whispered and clicked. Metal turned. The old bolt slid out like a tooth. Ruth followed me into the kitchen. She put her briefcase on the glass table and snapped it open. 2 stacks of paper, a legal pad, 3 pens. She set the deed on top of everything and held it down with her palm. Let me see the other folder, she said. I gave her the printouts. She glanced through eyes, moving quick, jaw working. She did not comment. She placed the emails to the right of the deed, separate but touching. You look the same, I said. You do not, she said, and then softened it. You look awake. Theo drilled. The door gave a little shudder with each bite of the bit. He worked through the front fast, then the back door and the laundry room door and the side gate. Locks in a neat pile on a towel by the sink, guts of a house arranged like puzzle pieces. He installed a new keypad at the front. He handed me a sheet to write a code and stood back while I punched it in. The new bolt slid with a solid click that felt in my bones. Try your old keys for me, Theo said. I tried. The metal bumped and slipped, looking for a way that was no longer there. Good, he smiled. We'll do the windows next. Ruth sat at the table and read head-bowed, glasses slipping down her nose. She lifted a page. You see this language, she said. Her finger tapped power of attorney. She flipped to a second page, circled the word collateral with the end of her pen. Do not sign anything. Not a delivery slip, not a birthday card, not a permission slip for a field trip. Nothing. I hear you, I said. Theo finished the front half by mid-morning. He brought me 2 shiny sets on a ring, plus a small envelope with spare cylinders. Only you get these, he said. Not your son, not your neighbor, not the dog. Your sister can hold one if you want, but hand it to her yourself. I am not a dog, Ruth said without looking up. Theo laughed, a short sound that shook his shoulders. He left to get parts. I made coffee with good beans and poured it in 2 cups. Ruth wrapped her hands around hers and leaned back in the chair that used to sit in my store behind the register. Where do you bank? She asked. I told her. Her mouth tugged to the side. Finish that coffee, she said. We are going to take a short drive. The bank air was cold enough to raise the hair on my arms. The woman at the desk wore a nameplate that read Marissa Ortiz. She was young and careful. She looked at Ruth, then at me, and spoke only to me. How can I help you, Mrs. Hart? I need to remove an authorized user, I said. I said the name. It sat in my mouth like a coin. Ruth slid a driver's license across the desk without being asked. Marissa typed. She read something on her screen and then looked up, neutral face intact. There is a secondary card on this account, she said. It has full access. Would you like me to cancel it effective immediately? Yes, I said. She asked for my confirmation twice. My signature. Pin pad beeped. Her fingers moved brisk on the keyboard. Done, she said. I recommend you also change your PIN and set text alerts. We can do that now. We did. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a test message. A plain sentence. Account change confirmed. No apology in the words, no judgment, just a new fact. Ruth waited by the door while I finished. When we stepped into the heat again, the sun bounced hard off the hood of Ruth's car. I could see the mountains behind the Walgreens in a faded line like chalk. Another bank, she said. Different branch, different system. She drove with her hands at 10 and 2, no radio, no chatter. I watched the blur of strip malls go by and thought of the bell at Heart and Ink the way it had always been a small kindness to be rung for. At the second bank, the air was warmer and smelled like toner. We opened an account with my name alone. The manager shook my hand. We moved the money. On the way out, Ruth stopped by a bulletin board that held photocopied ads with tear-off tabs. Piano lessons, house cleaners, a flyer for a flu clinic. She plucked one tab for the clinic and tucked it in her wallet. You hate flu shots, I said, surprised at the memory. I hate flu, she said. Back home, Theo had finished the windows. He held out a small paper bag with extra screws and tiny L-shaped brackets. For those 2 sliders, he said. They are old. These will help keep them honest. He left in a cloud of sun and metal. I stood at the blue door with the new keys in my hand. They were heavier than the old keys. The weight fit the hinge of my fingers. Ruth moved to the dining room. She slid her hand under one end of the glass table and jerked her chin at me to take the other. We lifted. The glass flexed in a way that made something electric crawl up my arms. Careful, I said. She snorted. Help me get the blanket. We went to the laundry room and folded the blanket off the pine table together. Dust motes rose like a held breath. We carried the old table back down the hall and set it where the glass had been. The wobble was still there. I pressed a shim beneath the short leg. It steadied under my palm. The grain caught the light in soft rivers. The little carved E and M in the corner made my chest tighten and then loosen like a knot pulled twice. The gray sectional did not want to move. We pushed the first segment 2 feet and had to stop. We pushed again and left a streak on the floor. Ruth wiped her forehead with her sleeve. This thing is a boat, she said. It is a cloud you cannot sit in, I said. She laughed, then surprised an old laugh I knew. We took the sectional apart and walked each piece into the spare room. The room swallowed it without gratitude. I went back to the living room and brought my rocking chair out from the hallway. It creaked as if it recognized the space. I put it by the window where the afternoon light made a square on the floor. I plugged in the small diffuser and set 2 drops of lavender in the dish. The smell lifted slow and low. We worked without talking much. The house changed under our hands one shape at a time. The cracked porcelain plate my mother had given me came to the front of the cabinet. I set it on a plate stand, a small kindness. The cheap Pilsner glasses went to a box. Salt and pepper shakers shaped like hot air balloons moved from a top shelf to the table where they belonged. Late afternoon, a white van with a logo pulled up. 2 men in polo shirts came in carrying small cameras and a hub the size of a napkin. They were polite in the way of people who know they are stepping into a story. One set a device above the door. One aimed a lens at the backyard raking across cinder blocks and a plastic slide that had faded to the color of old gum. The living room camera was small and black and almost shy. They connected everything to my phone, stood with me while the app loaded, and smiled when my screen showed the front porch in miniature. Give the house eyes, Ruth said, like she was checking an item off a list she had not shown me. I made sandwiches and we ate in the kitchen standing up. I did not know when I had last eaten standing up without rushing. The late daylight slanted in. Sage by the front walk caught a hotter wind and spilled its smell. Call Lucy, Ruth said with her mouth full. I do not know if she would pick up, I said. Call her, Ruth said. I did. Lucy picked up on the second ring with a hello that had the smile in it. I told her I sold the store. She already knew. I told her other things. She said she remembered the time I drove a ream of paper across town before school project. She asked if I needed anything. Mr. Arthur called me back without me leaving a message. He heard things before they settled and had a way of moving toward them quietly. He said he would stop by and then corrected himself and asked if I wanted him to stop by. I told him not yet. He said he would pray. He meant he would think of me without judgment. The sun pulled back and left a gentler light. The security app pinged once as a cat cut across the porch. The new lock lights blinked small green dots. There was a knock at 6. I expected it to be Theo and found a young woman on the stoop instead. She had a ponytail pulled through a ball cap and clear eyes that went soft when she saw mine find her face. She held a duffel in one hand and a stack of textbooks against her chest with the other. "Am I early?" she said. Ms. Morales said I could drop by. Kayla Ruth called from the hallway. "Come in." Kayla stepped over the threshold. She smelled faintly of hand sanitizer and laundry soap. She looked around as if the house were a book she had read once and forgot the ending. "I am Kayla Mendoza," she said to me. "I start clinicals at UNM next week. Ms. Morales said you might be renting a room." "I might be," I said. She looked at my hands. "My mom was Lupita," she said. "Lupita Stationers, Dallas Conference 2005. You gave her vendors when no one else would. You will not remember." I did. I remembered a woman with braided hair and a notebook that ran out of pages during the second session because she had filled them all with questions. I remembered sharing names and margins and deals on envelopes. I remembered thinking how young and brave she looked. "I remember," I said. Kayla's eyes filled and cleared. "She passed 2 years ago," she said. "I am sorry to tell you like this. She always talked about you when we had to make a hard choice." Ruth coughed into her fist. "Let me show you the room," she said. We went down the hall past the blue room that had been mine and was mine again. The second room held 2 small beds and a shelf with plastic dinosaurs. The room smelled like crayons and baby powder and people who left. Ruth pulled the bedding and shook it out the window. Dust went in a quick halo and fell away. We made the bed together. Kayla set her books on the desk beneath the small window that showed a sliver of the Sandias like a postcard. "How much?" Kayla began. $450, Ruth said. "Month to month. Respectful, quiet, no smoking, no chains of guests. If she says stop, you stop." "I can do that," Kayla said. "I know," Ruth said. Kayla set the duffel down and took a breath that settled her shoulders. She came back to the kitchen with us and stood with both hands wrapped around a glass of water like she could warm herself on it. When she smiled, she looked the age she was, not the age of someone who lost a mother. "You will have to tolerate a diffuser that smells like flowers," I said. "I grew up with the smell of paper and toner and coffee," she said. "This is nicer." Evening lay down and the house answered in softer noises. The cooler sighed. The refrigerator kicked off. The front camera showed the porch empty and then showed a moth as big as a thumb clinging to the lens. The blue door looked cobalt in the last light. Ruth walked the perimeter and checked each window again. She used her phone as a flashlight and ran her hand along each latch. She nodded and came back to the kitchen and poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a juice glass, raised her eyebrow at me until I opened a bottle of water instead. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Tired," I said. "And like I know where the walls are." She clinked her glass against my water bottle. "Good." Kayla excused herself to call someone, her voice low in the hallway, the tone of a person reporting safe arrival. Ruth did not bring up the emails again. The folder stayed on the pine table like a shadow. My blue-lined notebook lay beside it. I wrote 3 more lines in a handwriting that steadied as it went. The pine table, the rocking chair, the cracked plate. Ruth did not comment. She took the last bite of her sandwich and set the plate in the sink. "Sleep in your room," she said, "not the guest room. Your room." I did. The sheet smelled like detergent and a little like lavender. David's photo on the nightstand seemed to move with the dim fan. I closed my eyes and opened them and slept for a while in pieces, and when I woke, the house was holding still. Morning again. Coffee. The app pinged to show a delivery that never came. The day slid across the floorboard slow and warm. I wiped fingerprints off the glass of the picture frames and thought about nothing that hurt. Late afternoon, the light turned honey-colored and the blue door picked it up. I checked the new bolt again with my thumb and made sure the chain lay flat. Ruth sat in the rocking chair and read something on her phone. Kayla studied at the table with her hair falling forward and a pencil tucked behind her ear. At 5, a car slowed outside. The app threw an alert. Front porch motion. Tires whispered against the curb. Doors opened. Laughter too loud. The sound of a key in a lock traveled through the door like a whisper you could not pretend not to hear. The key scraped and failed. The doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. Mark stood on the porch in a polo that still had a crease from the hotel ironing board. Sloane had her sunglasses back on top of her head like a crown. Aiden tugged at his backpack strap. Lily's hair ribbon had slipped crooked. I opened the blue door to the chain. The air outside felt hotter than the air inside. "Why do the keys not work?" Sloane said. She tried hers again, as if trying were proof. "I changed the locks," I said. "This is my house." Silence swelled. The porch camera light blinked a patient green. Ruth sat where the rocking chair could see the door. Kayla was on the sectional's old footprint, a nursing text open, a pencil tucked behind her ear. She closed the book without a sound. Aiden slipped around Sloane and hugged me. Lily let her backpack drop and wrapped both arms around my hip. Sloane's smile did not reach her eyes. Cute. She looked past me, counting. "Where is our couch?" "In the spare room," I said. "Your clothes are in boxes in the master closet. They are labeled. You can pick them up tomorrow." 6 in the evening. Mark kept his eyes on the floorboards of the porch. He spoke quietly. "Mom, we live here. You have been my guests," I said. "You will get your things. You will not come and go with keys that are not yours." Sloane pointed at Ruth. "You did this. You have always wanted to split us." "She did not need me to change a lock," Ruth said. Her voice was even. She needed a locksmith. "Do not speak to her," Sloane said to me like I had not heard. "We will talk about this when you are reasonable." "I'm reasonable now," I said. Sloane's face pinched as if she had bitten something sour. "Get your hands off my children," she told me. She reached for Lily. Lily held on tighter. "Please do not make a scene," Mark said to no one and to everyone. "I'm not making a scene," Sloane said with a laugh that showed teeth. "I am handling a violation." Aiden lifted his chin and looked at his father. "Dad," he said. His voice was thin and brave. "Can we just go?" Mark blinked. His eyes were red at the edges in a way I recognized from when he was little and had not slept. He nodded. He adjusted Lily's ribbon, slung Aiden's backpack over his shoulder, and guided them down the steps. Sloane stayed 1 beat longer, like a person deciding whether to tip a table. "You will regret this," she said, and then smiled again. "I do hope the cameras work." "They do," I said. I closed the door on a new lock. The click did not echo. It settled. The house breathed in. I put my hand on the pine table to feel the grain. My knees loosened in a way I did not expect. Kayla brought me a glass of water and set it where my fingers could find it without looking. Ruth did not touch me. She stood near and let the air be quiet. When the phone lit, I did not reach for it. It lit again. It kept lighting. I turned it face down and watched the light halo against the table for a long time, then flipped it and read. Mark asked if we could discuss like adults. Sloane wrote fast words that stung. She wrote about children and roofs and shame. I did not answer. I slid my finger to block. I did not announce it. I just did it. The calm after felt like stepping out of a bright store into shadow. By 9, my name was on the next door page. A neighbor posted a message asking if anyone knew what was going on at the blue house on Arizona Street. Someone answered. Someone else added a story that was not theirs to add. Before bed, Sloane's public Facebook appeared on my screen without me searching for it. A photo of the kids sitting in a room that looked smaller than it probably was. The caption said, "Some people forget what family means. Pray for us." There were hearts and sad faces in the lines under it. Kayla saw my face and took the phone. "Do not read the comments," she said. She set the phone face down and slid it across the table out of reach. I lay in my room with the window cracked and the lavender fine as dust in the air. The house made night noises I knew by shape if not by name. A truck on the cross street, a siren far away, the swamp cooler settling to a lower hum. I slept in pieces. I woke twice and sat on the edge of the bed with the key in my hand like a small thing that could be lost. In the morning, Ruth poured coffee and said a name. "Anita Patel," she said. "She will see you today." I agreed. Ruth drove. The clinic was on a quiet street near the hospital, a building with long windows and chairs that did not try too hard. A receptionist smiled with her eyes and handed me a clipboard with a pen that already worked. Dr. Patel opened the door herself. She shook my hand and asked me to sit wherever I liked. The room was a simple place, a small clock, a shelf of books, a plant that looked like it enjoyed the light. Dr. Patel asked questions. She did not hurry when I did not answer fast. She gave me numbers to repeat and words to remember. She showed me shapes that turned into other shapes. She asked me to talk about the house without talking about the people in it. Her voice stayed level. She wrote notes in a hand I could not read and did not try to. She had me spell a word backward. She had me subtract by sevens until I laughed and asked for a new number. She asked me what day it was and then asked me what day it felt like. I told her Tuesday. It was Wednesday. She did not correct me. She asked me to close my eyes and think of a place where I felt my throat open instead of close. I told her the front stoop in April when the sage first smelled like itself. At the end, she printed a letter. She signed it with a blue pen that left a clear trail. She held the paper while the ink dried so it would not smudge. She handed it to me and met my eyes while I read. The words said that my memory was intact, my reasoning solid, my judgment uninfluenced, my mind my own. There was no flourish at the bottom, only a license number and a date. Back in the car, the paper felt heavier than paper. Ruth did not say good job. She did not pat my hand. She put the letter in the folder with the deed and the emails and closed the folder with a single press. At the grocery, Mrs. Carmen looked at me and then looked past me. The tomatoes smelled good. I chose 3 and put them in a paper bag and paid with cash. In the parking lot, a neighbor who had borrowed my ladder once raised 2 fingers in a small, hesitant wave. I lifted my hand and returned nothing else. The sky was white and very blue. Heat stood still over the asphalt. That afternoon, the doorbell rang twice. Ruth was in the back on her phone. Kayla was at the table underlining something in yellow. I checked the app. 2 small figures on the porch, hair too neat for a weekday. My heart did something it had not done in a long time. I opened the door. Aiden and Lily stood on the mat. No Sloane, no Mark. "Hi, Nana," Lily said, already walking in like she remembered the feel of the rug. "Where are your parents?" I asked. Aaron, Aiden said. He did not meet my eye. He looked at the camera on the soffit, then at the sky. He held out his hand. It shook. There were dollar bills in it, soft with use. I had $34. We used an Uber. Kayla stood, then held back in the doorway. I pulled them in and closed the door. Aiden looked older than 2 days ago. "Am I in trouble?" he asked. "You are here," I said. "We will handle the rest." He nodded. He put his backpack down and then picked it up again and held it in both hands like a shield. He took a breath that made the bones of his shoulders show. "I heard stuff," he said. "I did not try to. I was in my room. The door was open." Ruth came into the room without her shoes making a sound. She did not touch the boy. She knelt so that her eyes were level with his and waited. "It was after bedtime," he said. Mom said Dad should tell everyone you were sick in your head because then you would have to go somewhere else to live and they could keep the house. She laughed. She said you were easy to trick. She said the word collateral like in a movie. She said if you did not sign, they would make people think you were crazy. Every word landed in the room and stayed. Can I ask you something? Ruth said. Would you be willing to record what you just told us? We will not post it. We will keep it safe. It will help if anyone says you did not say it. Aiden looked at me. He put his hand in mine. His palm was dry and too warm. He nodded. Ruth set her phone on the table and opened a voice memo. She laid the blue-lined notebook beside it. She told Aiden her name and the date. She asked him to say his first name only. He did. He spoke slowly and tried to be exact. He stopped twice and swallowed and started again. When he got to the word crazy, his voice dropped and he fixed his eyes on the knot of wood in the pine table until he could finish. When he was done, the room was quiet in a way that let us hear the cooler change speeds and the far sound of a car door somewhere that was not ours. Ruth hit stop and typed a title. She put the phone down and covered it with her palm like a lid. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch in a shape like a comma. Kayla tucked a folded towel under her head. Aiden sat upright with both feet flat on the floor and his hands on his knees like he was holding a pose for a picture. "Thank you," I said. The words did not feel big enough, so I said them again. Ruth lifted her hand and looked at the phone as if it were a living thing. She met my eyes. Her face was steady and not quite calm. "This changes everything," she said. Ruth did not raise her voice. She picked up her phone and called Mark. The screen lit with his name each time it rang. He answered on the fourth ring. She said her name and asked him to come without the children. She did not explain. She did not ask. She gave a time. She called a notary next. The man's name was Mr. Sandoval. He said he could be there by 10 the next morning. Ruth said fine. She ended the call and looked at me. I understood. We did not say more. The night lay flat. Aiden and Lily slept in the small room with the plastic dinosaurs. They breathed the steady way children breathe when they feel for a moment like the ground under them will hold. Kayla sat cross-legged on the floor in the hall back against the wall, a book open without her eyes on it. Ruth slept on the couch with her phone face down on her stomach. I sat in the rocking chair and let the motion smooth my throat. Morning came with a dry heat that settled on the roof and stayed. I made coffee. Kayla scrambled eggs quietly. Ruth dressed in a navy jacket and tied her hair back. At 9:30, a small man with a neat mustache knocked and introduced himself as Mr. Sandoval. He carried a leather folder and a black pen he did not set down. "Where would you like me?" he asked. "The dining room," Ruth said, but she was pointing at the pine table. He understood. He nodded. Ruth laid out the papers in an order she chose. Deed on the left, emails on the right. Dr. Patel's letter square in the middle. The blue-lined notebook above all of it, with the tip of a pen resting in the spiral. She set her phone on the table and checked the voice memo app with her thumb. At 10:15, the porch camera blinked. A car door shut, a second door shut, too hard. The doorbell rang. I opened to the chain. Mark stood there with a face that looked older than his body. Sloane's lipstick was careful. She had a folder of her own under her arm. The air behind them moved with the smell of hot asphalt. "No kids," Ruth said from behind me. "No kids," Mark said. I unhooked the chain and stepped back. They crossed the threshold. Ruth did not offer them seats. She stood by the pine table with her hand on the folder like a person steadying a box in the back of a moving truck. "You called us," Sloane said, "so call off the security show and talk." Ruth slid Dr. Patel's letter forward. "We will start here," she said. "This is a recent evaluation. It states what it states. We will not argue about capacity." Sloane barely glanced down. "Anyone can buy a letter," she said. "You have always liked props." Mark read. His throat moved as he swallowed. He put 2 fingers on the edge of the page and then took them away. Ruth placed the printed emails beside the letter, pages in a neat stack with subject lines like threads. She lifted one and read a sentence that used my name with the words power of attorney. She lifted a second and read the phrase, put the house up as collateral. Her voice did not bend. She did not add adjectives. She placed the pages back down and aligned their corners with the table's corner. Sloane smiled without teeth. It was a joke, she said. You are cherry-picking. You are a lawyer. You know context. Ruth slid a page forward and tapped the emoji at the end of a sentence about convincing me. This is context, she said. Here is more. She passed Mark a single-page note with a notary stamp from a different office, the ink embossed in real. It recorded a visit 3 months ago in which a man had arrived with a document that named me and described me as too ill to appear. It recorded a notary refusing to proceed without seeing me. It recorded a complaint number that could be called. Mark closed his eyes. He did not deny it. He sat down in the chair without asking. He did not look at Sloane. Mr. Sandoval waited, his pen lay still ready. Ruth placed the folder with the bank alert on the table. Last week, she said someone tried to access an old account. The attempt failed. The bank reported the questions were answered correctly. Sloane looked towards the window and did not talk. Ruth set her phone on the table and spoke out loud for the record. She stated the date. She stated the names of the people in the room. She opened the voice memo and played Aiden's recording. His voice filled the kitchen. It was high and steady. He said the words he had said. Sloane flinched at the sound of her name in the boy's mouth. Mark covered his face with one hand and listened without stopping it. When the recording ended, the house went quiet in a way that made the small kitchen clock sound loud. Where is Aiden now? Sloane asked. She tried to find anger, but not much of it came. Not here, Ruth said. Mark set both hands on the table and pushed himself to standing. Then he sat down again. He looked at me with a face I had not seen since he was 8, and knocked over a glass of orange juice at a neighbor's house and waited for the trouble to drop on his shoulders. Mom, he said. He did not know where to go next in the sentence. He looked at the emails again, then at the letter, and kept his eyes away from the bank alert. I'm sorry, he said finally. I am sorry enough times to fill the room. Sloane let out a small laugh. Please, she said. This is theater. Evelyn, you have always liked a stage. Remember when you made a window display with staplers like a mountain? The mountain was ridiculous. I looked at her. I looked at the outline of my fingerprints on the pine, the places where the varnish had rubbed softer. I smelled sage from the doorway. The blue door threw a square of light across the floor. I thought of Aiden counting dollars for a ride. I thought of Lily's ribbon slipping and Mark's hand setting it straight on the porch the night before without looking up from his shoes. I set my hand on the deed and felt the cool of it come up through the paper. I spoke to my son. I love you, I said. You cannot live here. I will not give you money. You may see your children here when it is right. You may earn my trust back with the work of your days. That is what I have. He nodded. He looked at his lap and then he looked up again. He swallowed 2 times as if the first try had not worked. He pushed his chair back and stood. His left knee hit the underside of the table and thudded. He bent anyway. He put his hand on the floor to steady himself and went down to both knees. He did not do this often as a child. He was a stand-and-face-it child. He was not a kneel-and-ask child. He was on his knees now, and the kitchen light made a small shine on the bridge of his nose. I do not have a way to make this sound good, he said. I lied to you. I let her talk to you like you were in the way. I let the house feel like it belonged to us and not to you. I let the store you built be a story I told to make myself feel like a success. I told myself you did not need the money back because you had a way to make more. I used your love when I should have used my hands. He shook his head once like he had a fly to dismiss. I'm sorry, he said again. He did not reach for me. He did not cry until the last word, and then he could not stop. I did not lift him. I put my hand on his hair the way I did when he was small and feverish. I let my fingers rest and feel the growth there, and the way time always moves in one direction, whether we ask it to or not. You will get up now, I said. You will sign what needs to be signed. You will collect your things at the time I said. You will leave. He nodded. He stood. He wiped his face with the back of his hand and took the pen Mr. Sandoval offered. Ruth slid a document forward. It was a simple agreement. It stated that I owned the house. It set a time to collect boxes. It stated that the keys in their possession were not theirs and would be returned. It stated that there would be no access. Without my consent, no accounts touched, no letters signed for me, no statements about my mind made in public or private. It stated that violations would go to court. It stated a visitation framework for the children by consent, with times and days plain and short. Sloane crossed her arms and did not sit. I am not signing your document, she said. It is not yours to sign, Ruth said. Sloane laughed. It was not a kind sound. You think you have power because you have paper, she said. She looked at Mark. Do not be dramatic. We can talk to my cousin's friend and fix this. Mark did not look at her. I filed this morning, he said. She stared at him. She waited for him to take it back. He did not. Her face drained of the color she had put on it. She set her own folder on the table. It made a soft sound. She did not open it. You will regret this, she said to him, but her eyes flicked to me. You too. Maybe, I said. She took her bag and walked to the blue door. She put her hand on the knob and turned it as if the lock would make a different sound for her. It did not. She opened the door and stepped out into the heat without looking back. The smell of her perfume pulled like a thread across the threshold and then broke. Mark signed the agreement. His signature looked like a person doing their best to be steady. Mr. Sandoval notarized each page. He pressed the seal and the paper changed under his hands. Ruth slid the signed copy to me and slid another to Mark. She filed the original in the folder. She closed it and stood with her hands on the top for a second, as if smoothing a wrinkle in wood. Kayla came out of the hall with a glass of water and set it in front of Mark. He did not drink it. He looked at it like it was a small lake that could drown him. Your keys, Ruth said. Mark pulled a keyring from his pocket. He held it for a second thumb on the yellow tag that said our copy. He set it on the table. Ruth picked it up and placed it in the bowl on the console under the mirror. The keys made a softer sound than I expected. The mirror caught a slice of all of us. Mark stood. He moved like a person who had not slept. He put his hand on the back of the chair he had been sitting in and then took it away. He looked at me with eyes that were his father's eyes and his own eyes together. Can I hug you? He asked. Yes, I said. He leaned in. He did it gently. He did not hold on longer than he should. He stepped back. He nodded to Ruth. He nodded to Mr. Sandoval. He nodded to Kayla because he was raised that way. He walked to the blue door. He paused with his hand on the wrong side for a key he did not have. He looked at the knob, and then he looked at me. I walked over and opened it. Heat fell in. The porch smelled like dust and a neighbor's lawn that had been watered too much. The camera light blinked once and steadied. Thank you, he said. He went out. I closed the door with the new lock and turned the bolt. The sound was sure. It sat in the house and did not move. Mr. Sandoval packed his pen. He told us to call if we needed his stamp again. He put his business card on the table. It had a raised name that felt like Braille. He left in soft shoes. Ruth collected the papers without rushing. She looked at me but did not say I told you so or anything like it. She touched the blue-lined notebook with her fingertip. The last line I had written was still there, made darker by the pressure of my hand. The pine table held a new weight. The cracked plate on the shelf caught a bit of sun and showed its fault like a map of a river. The rocking chair scraped a friendly inch when I pulled it closer to the table and sat. The house exhaled. The cooler clicked. The camera on the porch saw nothing but heat. The blue door shone like it was new paint, even though it was not. I put my palm on the old key and let it warm against my skin. The house held a new shape after the signatures dried. Boxes left. The doorway felt wider. The bowl by the console took only one set of keys and kept them. Ruth called 2 numbers and turned her phone face down. By the end of the week, there was a short page on the pine table with pickup times and visits for the children, names written in a careful block hand. No ornaments, just hours and days. She set a copy for me and a copy for Mark and filed the original with the deed. The first weekend, Aiden and Lily arrived at noon with backpacks and a bag of oranges. Lily ran the length of the hallway and back, and then lay on the rug to look at the ceiling fan. Aiden hovered near the threshold between the kitchen and the living room like a person learning a new doorway. I cut 4 oranges. The juice ran down our wrists. We ate over the sink and laughed when the seeds did not listen. "Can we make the sage smell?" Lily asked, already on the step stool, reaching for the diffuser. 2 drops, I said, no more. Aiden stood by the pine table and looked at the blue-lined notebook. "Can I ask you something?" he said without touching it. "You can ask." "Are you mad at Dad every minute?" he said. "Not every minute," I said. I wiped orange from my palm. "I am busy some minutes." He nodded and his shoulders let go a fraction. He took a breath that sounded like air going in the right way. "Kayla learned the creaks of the hallway in a week. She moved quietly at night, textbooks under her arm shoes in her hand. She started leaving her bag by the door with her hospital badge on top of it so she could grab it when the alert came. She came home smelling like soap and metal and exhaustion. She ate whatever was in the fridge and washed the dish right away as if it were part of the bite. One afternoon, she stood in the garage doorway with a tape measure around her neck and a pencil behind her ear. She looked at the empty space like it was a page. "You ever miss the bell?" she asked. "I do," I said. "You can make another sound," she said. "Different bell." We cleared the garage. The air tasted like dust and old oil. The light came in hard and generous. We wiped down a folding table and covered it with craft paper. I brought out boxes of twine, a jar of buttons paper with good tooth, a tin of fountain pen nibs I could not part with when I sold the store. Kayla hung a string of warm bulbs from one nail to another. I wrote Blue Door Studio in pencil on a piece of card and taped it to the inside wall where you could see it from the driveway. Lucy came the second week with a stack of old photos and a plate of cookies. She set the cookies on the pine table and touched the carved initials with 2 fingers. "Still there," she said. "Still there," I said. Mr. Arthur stood at the doorway with a cautious smile and a bag of envelopes he had hoarded for years because he liked the weight. He paid for a class in cash and left the receipt in the jar without taking the copy. By the end of the month, 12 women sat at the folding tables with hoops and thread and a scatter of paper scraps that looked like confetti on the floor. Someone's radio played a station that liked soft voices. The smell in the garage was glue and lavender and warm dust. Laughter climbed the rafters and settled there. I stood with a pair of scissors and did not say much unless I had something to say. At the market, Mrs. Carmen looked at me once, and then again. On the second look, she smiled small and real and put 2 extra sprigs of cilantro in my bag. On the sidewalk, a neighbor who had stared too long 2 weeks ago stopped to tell me the name of the plant by her fence that I had asked about last spring. The word fell between us and made a little bridge. We walked on. Mark showed up on a Tuesday without a text. He did not have a suitcase or a story. He held a potted lavender wrapped in brown paper. Soil had loosened and dusted the rim. "For the porch," he said. "Thank you," I said. I took it like a person accepts a plain gift. He stood with his hands in his pockets and looked at the blue door and at the sage and at the cameras like they were part of a language he was learning. He looked thinner. He wore a shirt with a name patch I did not know on a pocket that carried a small notebook. "How is work?" I asked. "Good," he said. "I show up. I carry things I can actually carry." He glanced past me into the house. It was tidy on its own terms. His eyes landed on the pine table and then on the keys in a row beside the bowl. He looked at his shoes and spoke in a voice that belonged to the person he had been before he learned how to talk around what hurt. "I am paying something every week," he said. "Not to you, to the people I owe. It is slow. I do it anyway." I nodded. The lavender plant made the porch smell like what it was. He left without asking for lunch. The air behind him shifted. The cam light blinked once. Ruth came on Thursdays when she could. She checked a latch with the fingertip, read the mail, drank her coffee black, and asked Lily about spelling words like it was serious business. She did not bring up the emails or the court unless something required it. She brought sage starters from a nursery north of Santa Fe and set them by the path with quiet hands. Weeks passed and settled into a rhythm that did not ask me to pretend. Lily colored in the big postcards with balloons and taped them on the fridge at eye level for a child. Aiden asked for help on a science worksheet and frowned at the kitchen timer like it had a grudge. I opened the blue door for them on schedule and handed back backpacks at the end of the hours without checking the clock too often. By winter, the studio had a second folding table. I wrote names on masking tape and stuck them to mugs. A woman named Estelle came once and sat with arms crossed and then came again and uncrossed them. She cut paper with a steadier hand the second time. She asked for quiet and we gave it to her. In spring, the 3 sage plants by the path were bigger. The lavender Kayla had given new dirt started to throw color. The porch smelled like something clean even when the street was loud. Blue door paint chipped thin near the knob where fingers always go. I rubbed the spot and decided to leave it for now. It told a truth without speaking. A year from the day the locks changed, Saturday filled the garage with thread and paper and talk. The door stood open to catch a breeze that found the bulbs and made them sway. Aiden sat at the pine table with a school form and a pencil. He lifted his head without looking up from the page. "I have to interview someone I think is brave," he said. "Can I ask you questions later?" "Yes," I said. Lily came in from the porch holding a drawing. "I made our house," she said. The door in the drawing was too big and too blue. The sage looked like green suns. She had drawn a small square on the wall beside the door, a bowl for keys. She had drawn 4 keys that did not look exactly like keys and looked exactly like ours. Mark parked on the street and walked up the path with his shirt sleeves rolled in a small paper bag. He took a breath at the step like a person about to lift a box. He handed me a packet of sanding blocks from the hardware store and a bottle of hand soap that smelled like rosemary. "For the paint chip," he said, nodding at the door, "and the sink." I set the sanding blocks on the console and turned the soap in my hand. The air lifted the scent and folded it into the lavender already there. "Come eat," I said. "Kayla made something that might be dinner." He laughed once. He stepped inside and his eyes found the bowl of keys, because they always did. He did not reach toward it. He followed me to the kitchen and took out plates like a person who remembered where they go. We stood at the counter and ate with our arms bumping and did not need to say what it meant. After he rinsed the plates, Aiden wrote 2 questions on his form and Lily taped her drawing to the fridge. Kayla went out to the garage and turned the radio up 1 click. Ruth arrived late in a linen shirt the color of the door and set a bag of green chilies by the sink without ceremony. The light tilted. The cooler breathed. I sat in the rocking chair by the window and watched the square of sun on the floor slide toward the leg of the table with the initials. The blue door held its color. The keys sat in their line. The notebook lay open where I left it. I wrote a new line in the space between the old lines. The quiet. I closed the cover and set the pen on top. The smell of lavender and rosemary and chili moved through the rooms. The house listened and answered. The door was shut and the room was full. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.